Hello and welcome to our 8 News Now Investigators program. I'm Kyle Payne. Thank you for watching. Want to point out this show airs or debuts every Monday at 7 p.m. on our 8 News Now streaming app. And on Wednesdays at 7 p.m., our colleague Vanessa Murphy has High Heels and Hidden Truths, an excellent program. Hidden Truths, an excellent program that she hosts weekly, debuting Wednesday at 7 p.m. Today I'm joined by David Charnes, who has unfortunately a very tragic tale of a young boy who died in 2024 and the court case that ensued that wrapped up, at least to some degree, this week. We are taping this in this is January 16th, 2026. And David, you were in court for this terrible.
Yes. So this is a story that unfolded this week that got a lot of attention because of kind of how shocking this ended up. I was telling some people about this all week about how we kind of got involved because, Kyle, as you know, we don't necessarily seek out to get involved in some of these crime cases, but just inherently of what we do with our work, being in the court all the time, the murder cases kind of fall onto us to report. So this was a case where in 2024, I had seen that this gentleman named Christian Rubino was arrested for murder and found out that the victim in the murder was a 17-month-old child, which obviously raises a lot of questions because 17-month-old child, because obviously babies don't just die. And we came to find out that this child, Kai Tesoro, died from multiple injuries that at the time prosecutors accused Christian Rubino of committing. And this ended up getting extremely more complicated, which led to my story this week that I actually was never in. I provided the information, but
you never packaged it up?
I never presented it. It was what we call an anchor read, or our anchors presented it for you. And it ended with this man getting probation. And there's a very good reason why.
But he was accused of killing the little boy.
He was accused. We went from first-degree murder, could face, 25 to life, to probation.
And did relatively no jail time.
Well, he served about a year in jail while awaiting trial and then got out awaiting the sentence. But let's show you what aired on Tuesday, and then we'll talk about it.
He had no voice. He was a year and a half, no voice. Couldn't tell anybody that he was being hurt. Couldn't tell anybody. He was scared to death. All that took place, and he couldn't say a word. That's why I'm here today. For him.
That is the grandfather of a 1-year-old boy giving that child a voice on the day the man who prosecutors say killed him learns his fate. But that man is not going to prison.
So it turns out that prosecutors point to issues they had with evidence along with witness statements. So instead, they agreed to a sentence of probation. Our 8 News Now investigators first to look into the case of 1-year-old Kai Tesoro, who died in 2024. Doctors later determined, though, that the little boy had several brain bleeds and also a broken leg. His mother's then boyfriend, 29-year-old Christian Rubino, initially faced a murder charge, but today a judge accepted the deal where Rubino will serve probation, and he would only go to prison if he violates certain terms.
We got a person here that, we're talking a minuscule amount of time that they have to pay for taking the life of a 1.5-year-old child.
Once this deal is done, I owe you nothing. So you mess up, I'm sending you to prison for the rest of the entire time.
So that entire time could amount to 10 years. Kai's family says they donated his organs to help other children.
David, I'm sure you'll address Judge Jacqueline Bluth's comments at the end there and the prototypical armchair quarterback question, even in such a sad cases. How did we get here?
So what was really interesting about this case and why we were kind of following it was, as Vanessa knows, and Vanessa has reported on for years, child abuse cases are really difficult to prosecute because your victim is no longer here. And oftentimes your victim could never communicate the way adults communicate. And the grandfather mentioned that. You go from a first-degree murder it was a grand jury indictment, right? So prosecutors presented evidence to a grand jury. They charged him with murder. He was in jail awaiting trial. Then in November, this past November, took a plea deal, because ultimately prosecutors couldn't prove that he inflicted the injuries that caused this child to die. And the prosecutor explained that in the hearing, that not only are there no witnesses, but that the child's mother did not suspect or did not tell the police that her boyfriend or her ex-boyfriend could be responsible until a subsequent interview. So it took 3 interviews to get there. And during autopsy, they found other injuries that had healed. So when you find other injuries that healed, and you say this case were to go to trial, and the jurors get all this information, right? The jurors are presented with, this child died from injuries, but he has prior injuries that healed, and there's no one around to say what happened, and your primary witness, who didn't witness it, took multiple times to get there. You might not win your case.
No, that's what we call reasonable doubt.
Reasonable doubt, exactly. And I don't think they could prove this beyond reasonable doubt. And Jacqueline Bluth, who is the judge in this case, who herself used to be a child homicide prosecutor, a child abuse prosecutor, said, I really don't like this deal. I don't like how this guy is getting probation, but this is the best that she could see. There was what's called an evidentiary hearing where they kind of went over all this stuff that we did not attend. And they discussed that they probably couldn't take this to trial. And if you look at it from the other side, if you're Christian Rubino, this is great for you.
Yes.
You have 5 years probation. Now, probation isn't just sitting at a resort drinking mojitos and not working. I mean, he has to have a job. He can't drink. He can't do drugs. He can't get arrested. He can't get any trouble, or else he will go to prison for 4 to 10 years.
Has to report to his probation officer.
He's being monitored. But he went from being in jail awaiting trial to going on house arrest while awaiting this probation. And did justice prevail? This is just how the system is. There were a lot of comments. Well, who's the prosecutor, which we say in the article, and who's the judge, which we say in the article and show on TV. And I don't think the issues really here are about the prosecutor or the judge or the DA or the police. It's just, this is what it is.
Well, right. The evidence is what the evidence is.
Was.
And so if everyone seems to be under the impression that they just didn't have what it took to win at trial, then it might have made sense for the defendant to have gone to trial, except the overwhelming sentence, if you're found guilty, being life in prison, never seeing the light of day again, means you'd take the 5 years probation just to be able to end it.
Go from a possibility of life in prison, which is oftentimes, several decades in prison, you get parole, and then you're on parole, which is essentially probation for the rest of your life, or 5 years probation. I mean, that's quite a deal. And what we didn't get across in that, because there were other elements in terms of my workflow that day, was the prosecutor did not, the prosecutor was crying. She didn't, I don't think anyone really felt that this was fair, but it's the best they could do.
Right. And we get a little hardened with these stories. We don't necessarily have the same human reaction because we see it a lot. And it's not every day you see a prosecutor cry.
And it's not every day you hear a judge. I mean, some judges are more vocal than others, but
I believed her threat there.
Yeah, I mean, when she gets that way, she's definitely angry. But what this story shows is that a 17-month-old can die, and the ends of justice could be probation because no one witnessed the crime, and that 17-month-old can't speak for himself. And that's very disheartening, but also knowing all these facts and seeing how this case came together, I don't really think there was another option because they were going to lose at trial. No jury is going to sit there and go, he definitely did it, when you have prior healed injuries that you find because he wasn't around to do it. I don't think he was around to do it.
You can't.
And you just can't take that chance.
David, you did a wonderful job. You do a wonderful job. Thank you for coming and doing this segment with me.
Number one cheerleader.
Oh, well, I mean, sitting next to you, it's just so evident how much you care and how thorough.
We all care. You know what? We all care. And like what
the people need to know. We also need to go to break.
We asked the family if they wanted to talk, and they might at some point. I'd hope they would at some point. But again, you know, this isn't anyone's fault except the person who pled guilty. Now, he pled guilty by Alford, so he doesn't admit guilt. It doesn't admit guilt.
Right.
But an Alford plea means that he thinks that a jury would convict him.
The jury has the evidence to convict him, but he does not admit fault or guilt. And when we come back, we'll go from this story that deals with very strict probation to another story about a possibility of the death penalty on the other side of this break. Hello again. Welcome back to our 8 News Now Investigator program. I'm Kyle Payne. David Charnes has left the building. He went to Anchor, and now you've got me for the next two segments. A reminder that this episode, that the 8 News Now Investigators program debuts every Monday at 7 p.m. and Vanessa Murphy's High Heels and Hidden Truths every Wednesday at 7 p.m. This next segment or two is going to be about a death penalty case that is, as you see this episode, beginning a third trial. So a couple of years ago, I covered trial number 1, where a man named Anthony Newton was charged with murder, and not just any kind of murder. Anthony Newton had been in prison, and in what became a wicked love triangle, the man who he claimed had relations with his wife while he was away paid the ultimate price, if you are to believe prosecutors. And not only was there allegations of a murder for which Anthony Newton is charged, but the brutal aftermath and cover-up. But then there was a twist, which we could not have predicted, because we don't cover every murder case. We don't cover anywhere near every murder case. Death penalty catches my interest because there's generally some element of that chain of events that leads the prosecutors to want to make sure they pay that the defendant pays the ultimate price. But also, there was a surprise found in a mailbox long after the murder, and this story will explain that. By all accounts, Anthony Newton was locked up at Clark County Detention Center when a woman in Henderson sent her child to the mailbox and eventually found inside it a human hand. It's an unforgettable piece of evidence in an already vicious murder case.
So as we sit here now, we will not be able to answer for you how that hand ended up getting into that lady's mailbox a year later.
And now, over 8 years later, Anthony Newton's lawyers say their client, who's charged with brutally murdering this man, Cesar Molina, didn't do it, that he didn't and couldn't have killed him, that he didn't hack up his torso and dismember him, didn't take Molina's body in this car to this vacant lot in the Northeast Valley, pour gasoline on what was left of his corpse, and didn't light a match and walk away, leaving his body to be found by a woman who lived in this blue tent after Molina, then 33, was killed around Christmas 2016.
I want you to pay attention during this trial to the state's witnesses and listen to what they say.
It's what one of the witnesses said in the prosecution's last attempt to try Newton for this murder that led to Judge Jacqueline Bluth declaring a mistrial. The jury was never supposed to hear about Newton's criminal history, but one of the two people arrested with Newton, Kelsey Glass, let the cat out of the bag.
So please, under no circumstances does that word come out of your mouth.
The judge warning witnesses who testified Monday to avoid discussing Newton's prior prison time. The prosecution telling the jury Newton killed Molina because Molina slept with Newton's wife while Newton was behind bars. Lawyers expect this case to last 3 weeks. If Anthony Newton is convicted, the judge will start an entire separate phase of the trial to determine whether the jury will sentence Newton to death. Reporting at the Regional Justice Center, Kyle Payne, 8 News Now. So that was my coverage of the first day of the second trial. So the first trial, this is what happened. They go in, they have opening statements. The the prosecutor says, these are the charges against Anthony Newton. This is what happened. They introduce you to the victim. They outline what they say is just a brutal, gruesome, heinous crime. They don't give a motive because the motive would have betrayed the fact that Anthony Newton had done prison time. And a jury is not really supposed to be able to know that. They're not supposed to be able to know someone's got an extensive criminal history or was in prison for X, Y, or Z, because that arguably could be prejudicial. And the jury might say, well, if he was in prison and he's been arrested, he might be more likely to have committed this crime. And kind of in the world of the criminal courtroom, in a jury trial, it sort of happens in a vacuum. And we don't look at criminal history necessarily. We don't say, well, this is a really bad guy, so therefore you should factor that into to what may or may not have happened to Ulysses Cesar Molina. And so that was the first day of the second trial. The first trial ended by a mistrial. The judge had no choice because one of the very first witnesses, if not the first witness, was this love interest who indicated that, well, when Anthony Newton was behind bars, this is what happened. And shortly thereafter, the lawyers met, and the judge, Jacqueline Bluth, had no choice but to call a mistrial. Jacqueline Bluth was the judge in the case that we just discussed a few minutes ago with David. And if you are a watcher of this 8 News Now Investigators program, you may have seen Jacqueline Bluth before. She's a very high-profile judge. The judges are elected here in this county. And if you've watched prior episodes, Josh Tomchek, you may have recognized there as Anthony Newton's attorney. He's another high-profile attorney. I covered a murder trial when I first got here of a man named Thomas Randolph, who was known as the Black Widower. That became international news. Dateline was there, and other national media was there. Documentaries have been done. In fact, I was briefly spotted in one of those documentaries that I think it was ID Discovery did. And so, if you watch this more and more, you'll see some of the same characters because they're so excellent at what they do and they're so well thought of, they end up in some of these situations. So we often see Judge Tierra Jones, who gets a ton of these high-profile murder cases. We twice today saw Jacqueline Bluth. Josh Tomchek also currently represents Henderson City Councilwoman Carrie Cox in a felony charge that she faces at Clark County District Court. So, they had the first trial. They waited several months. They wanted to get back to it. They started a second trial. And when we come back from this break, we're going to discuss the nuts and bolts of how yet another trial ended with no result, which is why on this very day that our episode here debuts, they are starting trial number 3, which is why at the bottom of your screen it says death penalty trial take 3. So on the other side of this break, we'll get into what to expect on the third trial and how that second trial ended. Stay with us. Welcome back to our 8 News Now Investigators program, streaming here on the 8 News Now app, available on Apple TV, Roku, Samsung TVs, and a host of other electronic media. I'm Kyle Payne, and this segment is talking again about the Anthony Newton death penalty trial, which, as we watch this for the first time, Monday at 7 p.m., was... Well, actually, it airs on Tuesday. The trial begins on Tuesday because today is a Martin Luther King holiday. So on Tuesday, tomorrow, the show, the trial will begin jury selection. And I can tell you from sitting through jury selection on so many different trials, including twice this death penalty trial, and for that matter, currently ongoing trial in the sexual assault charge case against the former Hollywood actor Nathan Chasinghorse, the man who was in Dances with Wolves and now faces 21 accounts related to sexual abuse. Jury trial in these high-profile cases can be very difficult, if not because of the public exposure of some of these cases, but because some people may have trouble sending someone to death, which that would be a possibility if someone's found guilty in a death penalty case. A jury may have to decide that person's fate in a separate round of testimony. And then, in the case of Nathan Chasinghorse, we watched as jurors explained that many of them, sadly, a lot of them had their own dealings with sexual abuse. And so in this death penalty case, I think we can expect a week or so of jury selection, and it wouldn't be until the next week that we would hear opening statements. So you just saw my report after opening statements of the second trial, and I believe the package we're going to watch right now, my reporting was about how this most recent trial ended. Thursday, this jury heard from a DNA analyst who examined bloody clothing and other evidence found at the various crime scenes in this case. But it was the discussion of the defendant's wife's extramarital affair with the victim and an ensuing pregnancy and abortion that took most of the court's attention.
And paternity's never been established, ever. That is a huge stretch.
Defense attorney Josh Tomczyk criticizing prosecutors' theory that his client, Anthony Newton, instructed his then-wife to get an abortion after a love affair with the victim, Cesar Molina, arguing there's no proof Molina was the father and that the jury shouldn't hear a word about it because abortion is so controversial it might get in the way of Newton getting a fair trial. And on that point, the judge agreed.
I think that people are this is really like division, and I have some major concerns on the prejudicial effect.
Prosecutors say Newton and his brother-in-law killed Molina around Christmas 2016, strangling him, dismembering him, and then burning his corpse in a vacant lot, all because of that affair when Newton was behind bars.
Our theory is the fact that she got pregnant as a result of this affair makes the affair more painful and more upsetting. To me, it would explain why you'd be really mad.
This is the second time Newton stands trial for Cesar Molina's murder. The judge in this case declared a mistrial last year when a different jury heard evidence about Newton serving a prison sentence. Closing arguments are expected Tuesday. Reporting at the Regional Justice Center, Kyle Payne, 8 News Now. So after those closing arguments, a jury was unable to reach a verdict. So the first trial ended because the jury heard something that they were not supposed to hear. The second trial ended because the jury could not reach a verdict. They call that a hung jury. And the third trial, I expect to be very efficient. The attorneys have had a chance to at least do their openings one time, interview some of the witnesses, in some cases 2 times. This will be a third time. And so, a third time, hopefully, for at least one side will be the charm. Anthony Newton's been in jail for quite some time, I think since 2017. I think there were some mental health issues, and I believe during that time, COVID slowed everything down in the criminal justice system, not only in Las Vegas and Nevada, but across the country. So it should be interesting. I think that trial will generate some national attention. We may see some national media come to Las Vegas to criminal court, as they often do, to cover that case. The facts haven't changed. Anthony Newton's been in prison for that long. The trial 1 looked a lot like trial 2, at least what we're able to see of both. And then, trial 3 should be very similar. I guess it's probably worth mentioning that in addition to the death penalty, the hand being found in the mailbox was one of the reasons that I went back not only that first time, but went back a second time and to go back a third time. And we think that if the viewers enjoy some of the behind the scenes material of these cases, and for what we do here, the behind the scenes material was no greater of interest than the newsroom discussing whether we should A, be able to show a human decomposed hand, or B, whether to blur it. And so in the very first time we had the opportunity to put it on television, we agreed people needed to see it because it's so unusual and so bizarre, but it was graphic, and often this is at the dinner table. We decided to blur it, and then cooler heads prevailed, in my opinion, because we thought, you know what, this is not, we're not making it up, we're not sensationalizing anything. This is what it is, and the people, you people at home, I think, need to be able to see that. And it's a crazy thing that generally, like is the case so often in these stories that we cover, you simply can't make it up. So, the coverage of the first trial looked a lot like the coverage of the second trial, and the coverage of the third trial will no doubt be similar. You will see that hand again. You will hear the state's case against Anthony Newton. You will hear his defense attorney tell you that things are not as they appear. And I'm sure we'll be back to update you on that and some of these other important cases that we do every Monday at 7 p.m., debuting this 8 News Now Investigator show, and on Wednesdays at 7 p.m., High Heels and Hidden Truths with my colleague, Vanessa Murphy. I would not miss that one. Thank you for watching, and we will see you next time. I'm Kyle.